Welcome back, everybody, to another In My Aviation History series, and this is episode 27 in my series on the history of the RCAF. Today, we'll be looking at 424 Squadron. From its start in World War II as a bomber unit to today as a search and rescue unit, 424 has been active almost continually since 1942. But before we get too far into this, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. So 424 Squadron was formed on October 15th of 1942 as a bomber unit, the RCAF's 6th, and was based at Topcliffe. It was assigned the squadron code QB and was part of 4 Group. They received their first aircraft, Wellington Mark IIIs, on October 23rd and began training. On January 1st of 1943, the unit moved over to 6 Group, the RCAF bomber group, but nothing else changed for the unit. The unit flew their first mission on the night of January 15th-16th when 3 Wellingtons took part in an attack on Lorient. The target was bombed and all aircraft returned to base. Later that month, the unit took part in its first missions laying mines, so-called gardening missions, along the coast of occupied Europe. In February, the unit began to receive the upgraded Wellington Mark X, which had more powerful engines than the Mark IIIs. April 8th brought a move to Leeming, and while here, on April 10th, 424 was selected as one of 3 RCAF units to relocate to the Mediterranean theater, along with 420 and 425. You can see my history on 420 Squadron above. May 3rd, they moved to Dalton, and May 16th, the first of the units left on their way to North Africa. Now, I am unable to confirm whether the aircrew flew the aircraft there or took a ship and picked up new aircraft in theater. By June 23rd, the unit was at their new base at Kairoun, Tunisia, and they flew Wellington Mark X tropicalized variants. These had dust filters and other equipment to ease operations in the hot desert. The first mission in North Africa took place on the night of June 27th, when 8 aircraft were sent to bomb docks near Messina, on the northeast coast of Sicily. They supported the Allies' invasion of Sicily and later the invasion of southern Italy proper, with missions flown almost every night. On September 30th, the unit moved to the Hani East landing ground, and October 8th, the unit found out that it would be leaving the North African theater and returning to Europe. They were to only take with them personal belongings, and all other equipment, tents, and aircraft would be left behind for other units. The unit left North Africa via ship on October 15th and returned to England by November 6th. On their return, they were assigned back to 6 Group and were based at Skipton-on-Swale. They were given Halifax Mark IIIs, but with the crews needing 4-engine conversion, the aircraft did not arrive on base till mid-December. Once all the necessary training was done, they flew their first ops with the Halifax on February 15th when 8 aircraft were tasked with bombing Berlin, a rough return to the European theater. The unit continued to bomb German targets, and in January of 1945, the unit converted to Lancaster. They flew a mixed fleet of Mark Is and Mark IIIs, the only difference being the Mark III's Packard Merlin over the Mark I's Rolls-Royce Merlin. Now, they flew these right up to the end of the war, with their last mission being flown on April 25th of 1945. Starting on May 8th, the unit began to fly POWs back from Europe, with the first missions going to Brussels, as well, later on, to Juvincourt, France. In August, the unit was moved over to 1 Group after 6 Group was stood down and continued to fly POW missions, ferrying personnel back mainly from Italy. The unit officially stood down on October 15th of 1945. During World War II, the unit flew 17,478 operational hours during 3,257 sorties. It dropped 8,776 tons of bombs. It was credited with 9 enemy aircraft destroyed and 5 damaged out of a total of 60 enemy encounters. It lost 52 aircraft, with 37 aircrew killed, 252 missing, 14 POWs, and 10 injured. The post-war life of 424 started on April 15th of 1946 when the unit was reactivated at Hamilton, Ontario as an auxiliary unit. It was initially to have been a bomber unit, but the orders were amended at the last minute and the unit formed as a fighter squadron. It was given the squadron code BA and was initially given Harvard Mark IIs, with the first aircraft arriving in November of 1947. In November of 1950, the unit got their first Mustang Mark IVs, and they flew these until September of 1956. In October of 1954, the unit got their first Silver Stars, and in May of 1956, they got a few Expeditors. As mentioned, the Mustangs left in September of 56 and the Silver Stars in October. On September 1st of 1957, the unit was moved over to Training Command and helped train new multi-engine pilots using the Expeditors and the Harvards. But in December of 1958, the Harvards were given up and the unit flew only the Expediter. On April 1st of 1960, the unit was moved over to Air Transport Command, and in October of 1961, the unit received their first Otters. They continued to fly the Otters and the Expeditors till March of 1964, when the unit was disbanded during a general drawdown of RCAF squadrons. It wasn't gone long, however, and on July 8th of 1968, just after the unification of the Canadian Forces, the unit was reactivated at CFB Trenton as a communications and transport squadron using assets and personnel from 102 Composite Unit. Now, their history at this point gets very hard to find online, so I have done my best to piece together what I can for what aircraft they flew and when, and I'll be presenting them in the order that they entered service. So upon reactivation, they were assigned CC-108 Caribous, CH-125 Vertol helicopters, and CH-113 Labrador helicopters. Both the Caribou and the CH-125 would be gone relatively quickly, both being retired from service in 1971. The CH-113 would be the longest-serving aircraft in the unit, flying right up till their retirement in 2004. Now, in 1976, the unit sent a detachment of CH-113s to Summerside PEI and eventually to Torbay, Newfoundland, to help cover East Coast search and rescue requirements. And by 1977, that detachment to Torbay was renumbered as 103 Rescue Unit. Now, just to be aware, I do plan to be doing a video on 103 Rescue Unit near the end of this RCAF series. Now, in 1970, the unit received a number of CC-115 Buffaloes and CC-129 Dakotas and used these in both the rescue as well as general transport role. The Dakota did not last long, and they were retired by 1973. Now, 424 Squadron's Buffaloes were rotated out to overseas detachments as needed, usually flying on United Nations missions, and as such, they kept their white overall paint scheme while they were flown domestically in Canada between deployments. In 1975, the Buffalo started to only be used in the search and rescue role, and 424 kept a few for these duties. Now, as far as I can tell, 424 Squadron retired the Buffaloes in 1995. In 1971, with the retirement of the Caribou, the unit got a small number of Twin Otters, which were used for light search and rescue work as well as general transport duties. They flew these until roughly 1995, when the remaining aircraft were transferred to 440 Squadron. Now, similar to the Caribous and Buffaloes, these were loaned out to overseas detachments for United Nations missions and tended to keep their white paint scheme when flown domestically. Now, in 1976, the unit received a number of CH-135 Twin Hueys and flew them mostly on base flight search and rescue missions. They flew these until 1995, when they were retired from the unit. In 1994, what can be considered the beginning of the modern era for 424 Squadron, began when it received their first C-130 configured for fixed-wing search and rescue duties, taking over from the Buffalo after they were all sent out west to 442 Squadron. Now, not too long before I filmed this video, the unit received their first C-130Js, as the older C-130Hs are all being retired. In 2003, with the retirement of the CH-113 imminent, the unit received the CH-149 Cormorant, but with the low number of airframes in the forces and the maintenance issues suffered early in their life, the CH-149 was quickly pulled from Trenton and by 2006 was replaced with the CH-146 Griffin. Today, the unit flies the CC-130 and the CH-146 exclusively and provides search and rescue coverage for the majority of central Canada, from Quebec City to the Rockies and from the US border to the North Pole. Depending on the time of day, they're either on a 30-minute or a 2-hour standby to deploy. Now, 424 Squadron is slated to replace the CC-130 with the CC-295 as they come online, but it'll be interesting to see if the airframes will be online soon enough and in enough numbers to warrant this change. And with the C-130J being moved into the unit, I feel like this plan may have been pushed to the side. Now, at any rate, thank you for watching, and we will see you all next time.